Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. I've got a couple that are both authors and both very smart and interesting people that are going to tell us about a book that they've just published called Tough Resiliency, Smart Agility. And I think it's something we need to know about in regards to real estate development and buildings and infrastructure, but also probably life. And so it's going to be an interesting conversation. And I thought what would be fun is rather than me introducing them, I'll get each one of them to introduce the other. So Phil, can you please introduce Danielle Papillon to us?
It of course would be my pleasure. Danielle and I have a 25-year relationship, but it was interrupted briefly by my 7-year walkabout when I went to live and work in Abu Dhabi, UAE, India, and China. Nonetheless, we prevailed, and we're probably a good example of tough resiliency. And Danielle is a really well-regarded corporate trainer and teacher. And so she has really an exemplary career of consulting and providing information and guidance to some of the largest corporations in Canada. And more importantly, she and I, between the two of us, have 7 children.
7 children. Danielle, how did you have 7 children? And please introduce us all to Phil.
Well, may I say it's between the two of us and 14 grandchildren. Yes. So
congratulations.
Thank you so much. If your birthday is not in our outlook, it doesn't happen. If events are not in our outlook, it doesn't happen.
I can imagine Thanksgiving or Christmas at your place is just a little bit crazy.
It is crazy. Absolutely. Yes. So as Philip said, we've had a relationship for 25 years. We actually met online. And he was living
online. Did online exist 25 years ago?
Yeah, we're dinosaurs. You're right.
Yes, it did exist. However, you couldn't send pictures. You couldn't send voicemails. You couldn't send your email address. It was all through it. The application was called TLC Plus, and that's what we were on. So I never knew what he looked like until we met. And so speaking from him from a professional point of view, he is well versed in shopping centers, in not only building them, but maintaining them through the years. He was in North Bay with the shopping center there, Northgate Shopping Center, and doing other developments, hotels, etc. Right? And then he did escape and spend 7 years being around the world and doing developments around the world. Now, of course, when he came back, he came back on a Tuesday, and on a Wednesday night we were having dinner, right? So, and the romantic story goes on from there. But from a professional point of view, he's into development, into mixed use development. We've actually have written a book about that as well, right? In regards to the different applications. It's called Vertical Villages, for example. He loves to write, absolutely. And he loves being part of the growth and planning for our cities, and he's very avant-garde in thinking as well. And he also was a professor, right, for many, many years. And yeah, so is there anything that I've missed?
Phil, is there anything she missed?
Many things, but some of them are unprintable, but that's okay.
So Phil, tell us about this book.
Sure. Well, firstly, let me tell you its origins. Like all of us during the pandemic, we were presented with enormous challenges. And so as a result of that, we all made our way. Most of us did. And some in better condition than others. And what it exemplified for Danielle and me, upon reflecting, we realized that it was a test of our resiliency. But not only a test of our resiliency, but our ability to, in an agile way, apply our capabilities to be able to prosper. And so we thought, and I believe it's correct when I talk about the reception we've had, that other people would like to not only understand that story, but more importantly, we have lessons that we've learned that we would like to pass on. Danielle and I have an educational background, as she was describing, and so, we're not only lifelong learners, but we're lifelong teachers or sharers of experiences. So that's what led us to create the book. And the result is that we have not only prepared, I think, a description of what tough resiliency and smart agility are, but also the scientific underpinnings of the processes, their essential nature and requirements. And as well, we have provided programs by which we can teach both individuals and organizations how to apply them effectively. So that's the sort of the origins of the book, shall we say. And you asked me the question, what is the book about? Well, it's good to start with definitions, and probably one definition that I think is really important is the fact that the challenges that we experienced through the pandemic were, let's call it, species wide. And someone had something to say about that in the not too distant past, and that's Charles Darwin. And he said, "It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change." And when you apply it to we all people, persons rather, it is our adaptive capacity that we're talking about. That's what tough resiliency is, and smart agility. Of course, the world is on fire with a lot of books on resiliency and even on agility. We've taken it to another level, we believe, and why we selected the title we did is that tough resiliency is about resilience at its highest level. And it emphasizes strength, flexibility, and proactivity. Smart agility represents the optimal form of agility, not merely reactive, but proactive, emphasizing responsiveness, strategic thinking, and adaptation. So that's the basis for the book. And how we went about writing it is we conducted a lot of research. And we tapped into the learnings and teachings of a lot of the best minds in the world who have very current research and lessons to teach us. And we share those. And we identify them, of course, in the book so that people can look for them, elsewhere and online. But, the foundation, we believed, had to be resting on great research. And that's what we spent most of our time doing, is great research.
I didn't realize you were a professor. What were you a professor in, sir?
I was for 13 years professor of international development for Asia for Canadore College. Now, it was largely an ambassadorial role, although I did have some, opportunities to share my learnings. And I also was a professor of visiting professor at Shenzhen University in China, teaching master's level students of architecture and engineering. So, that comes from an impulse on my part, as I was saying earlier, to share what I've learned.
Right.
And so that's the background to that.
Danielle,
I've retired as a professor now, but just in the last few months.
We were
Danielle, you
also
were a
invited. I'm sorry, go ahead.
You were a corporate trainer. Tell me about that experience.
So it all started when I was working at Sheridan College, and I was responsible for, I'm sure that you recall, during the Bob Ray times, we had a program called Jobs Ontario. So I had a huge responsibility with Jobs Ontario. And what that was anyone who was unemployed for 2 years or less could come into one of our programs and to update themselves so they become employable again. And so I would be in charge at times, maybe 6 classes at a time. And so it's a lot of project management there. And the classes were all about updating for them to become employable. And at times, it would be not only to become employable, but also to find them work as well. So to give you an example that includes resiliency, by the way, is one of the classes that I was responsible for was 16 single moms who were all on welfare. And so this is quite some time ago. So the idea some time ago was if you were on welfare, you didn't want to work, which was completely untrue. And so I had women that were very eager to produce, to provide, and to grow a career. So in this particular class, the first day, of course, is orientation, introducing themselves and doing icebreakers and things like that, right? And so at the end of the day, I said to my class, or I asked my class, how was your day? And in classes, you always have a leader, always a leader in every single class, no matter what kind of class it is. And I had them for 16 weeks, by the way. So it was quite long term. And there was this lady called Ruth. She was the leader of the class. And she said, it's not going to go well. We don't think that you can assist us, teach us, be responsible for us because you don't know who we are. You don't know what we are. You don't understand the problems that we go through. You don't have the experiences that we have. So I looked at her and I looked at the class and I said, what do you mean? Right? Like I was confused. Like, what are you talking about? And she goes and says, look at your hair. You've got beautiful hair. We don't have the money to go, get our hair done. Look at your nails. You got beautiful nails. We don't have that kind of money. Look at the way that you're dressed. Like you don't know what we go through, right? So I stood there and I said, well, firstly, I'm a natural blonde, so I don't go to the hairdresser that often. Secondly, I said, I could prove it to you that I'm a natural blonde, right? They all started to laugh. And I said, I do my nails every Sunday night because I like to look good. And yes, my clothing is beautiful, but it's over 10 years old. And what I've decided, I'm a single mom with 3 children. I have them 365, 724. I provide for them myself. I have no help. I have no family around. So yes, I do understand what you're going through. But one of the things that I've decided to do was not to live in muddy waters. I wanted to grow. I wanted to move forward in a positive way. And this is what you're seeing. And this will be the outcome for you as well. They applauded. We shared tears. We shared laughter. At the end of the program, out of 16 students, 15 were employed. 1 was not employed until 1 month later, who earned 6 figures at the time. So the resiliency there was not only from what I was going through and what I had gone through and what I was continuing to go through, but them as well, right? So it was a great experience that I had with them. It was a lot of growth for all of us.
What a great story. Thank you for sharing that with us. And frankly, it sounds like you could add another word to your title, which is empathy, because it sounds like what you really instilled was empathy, both in you for them and them for you, and sharing that story with you. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back in just 2 more minutes with Danielle and Phil. Stay with us, everyone. We're talking about tough resiliency and smart agility. Stay
Agility.
with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. We're chatting tonight with Danielle Papillon and Phil Richardson. They are the authors of an intriguing book that I really am interested in reading called Tough Resiliency and Smart Agility. And I thought it was going to be about buildings because that's what Phil's business is all about. But it sounds like it's more about us and about relationships and about people, both in their personal lives as well as their careers. I got to ask you two, there's a lot of people that talk about persistence and commitment as a critical thing, and talking about hitting your head against the wall until such time as you get through. But resiliency is different than that, I think, isn't it? Tell me how you define resiliency and how it might differ from, keep trying until you don't give up. Commitment type of persistence kind of things. What's the difference between resilience and persistence?
I think persistence is a part of resiliency, but the fact is that resiliency is our adaptive capacity. So, that's a broader term. It's not just persisting, but it's also, we evolve and we become more adaptive to circumstances, many of which are a surprise to us. I mean, after all, the pandemic was a terrible surprise for many, if not all. And people adapted in their own ways, some more successfully than others. Agility is another aspect to it. It's sort of the other side of the same coin, but they're not to be confused. Agility is the ability to adjust quickly. And when we add the terms tough and smart to those two terms, what we're talking about is the optimal situation, that we can express in our lives, both personally and corporately. And you alluded to the fact that my background is the development of large projects, and I was very blessed to be offered opportunities around the world to do so. And so in the doing of that, my learning curve was always going straight up. And to begin with, what I learned was that we have an organization of people. Functionally, that's what it's all about. Org charts aside, that's what we've got are the relationships that we rely upon to succeed in achieving goals that we set for ourselves. So in the case of Ferrari World, I used a very sort of Canadian approach that I learned here. I stole it from McDonald's head office. I arrived one time when I was doing a deal with them on the ground floor, and I was sent up to the 9th floor. And as I got off the elevator, the next person I saw was the chairman of the board. He's sitting behind glass. And the entire space was open space, so that there was interaction available. Everybody participated. So I used that principle in Abu Dhabi, and I had 14 different cultures represented on my team. I had a team of between 400 and 500 architects and engineers, and we had 5,000 workers whom we had to guide through to produce the result we were seeking. Well, I made a couple of rules. One rule was nobody could call me by anything but my first name. Some called me Mr. Phil, but generally speaking, that leveled the organizational field. And secondly, I too sat in the middle of the collection of people in open spaces. I allowed nobody offices, including myself. And what that did was it put me not only in the picture so that I knew what was going on, but I invited people to come up and talk to me. And as they did that, they gave me ideas I would never have had. So that was a successful application of resiliency and agility that produced the effect that we achieved. We built a 2.5 million square foot development, a part of the total I was in charge of, called Ferrari World, in a total of 3 years, from flat sand to opening ceremony. And it was a building that we we actually designed as we built it. And so it had many challenges. But as a result of that, all of us learned something and we pulled together, and all of us learned to express our resiliency and our agility in the way we went about it. And in fact, I used a very sophisticated method called Agile, which was developed first by the space industry, then software, and then we introduced it into the commercial realm. And it's a 360-degree interactive and inclusive process that beats the waterfall techniques that we've customarily followed in the past, hands down. So, imagine the opportunity I had to grow by being able to introduce these ideas and so on that I believe would work, and they did successfully. So there's a corporate example of how we applied tough resiliency and smart agility.
Phil, I appreciate that. But to be candid, I don't think that's resiliency. I think that's openness, that's diversity, that's inclusion, that's maybe back to Danielle's empathy. It's back to the 1 Minute Manager or whatever it is that talked about management by walking around. You were open to ideas from a diverse population, and you had relationships. Isn't that different than resiliency and adaptability?
I understand your point. I think they're one and the same, and here's why. Basically, had we not applied our desire to exercise tough resiliency in the face of this enormous challenge that we had, we wouldn't have succeeded. So what you're talking about are the methods by which we succeeded. But fundamentally, underneath it all, we had to have the resiliency to be able to achieve it, to apply them and to achieve it. We used smart agility by developing new and innovative ways to respond to the needs that we had to create the project. So I disagree with you in respect to its being different. It's fundamental, let's call it that. But the processes you talked about are absolutely well known. The trick is that you've got to work on the underside. That is the foundation, the resiliency and agility. Danielle, would you like to add something?
Yes, if I may expand on that. So I'm just going to go back to the book for a moment. The way that we've written the book is obviously focusing on resiliency and agility. So what we've done is we've said, okay, let's take a look at the individual. As an individual person, how do you become more resilient? Which you become tough, resilient, right? And we talk about that. Then we go into, what about if you're a team? How do you become more resilient in a team? And then we move it more forward to go as a corporation. How do you become more resilient in a corporation? So the tools that or the skills that Philip used was not only individual, but as a team and as a corporation as well. So I'd like to go more into depth about resiliency. So I'm just going to give you an example. Let's just say you bicycle many miles a day, right? Your legs are nice and strong. But let's just say now you want to become a football player, right? And you need to exercise, you need to strengthen yourself. Well, your legs are nice and strong because you've been biking for so long and many kilometers a day, shall we say. But what about your arms? What about your back, your stomach, your abs, so forth and so on? So you have to exercise those muscles as well. So now I want you to think about resiliency of in your brain having 7 different kinds of muscles. So I'm just going to let you know, share with you what the muscles are. So positivity, confidence, priorities, creativity, connection, structure, and experimenting. So those are basically the 7 muscles that you need to use in regards to resiliency and agility, right? So which ones do you have? Well, we all have them. It's a learned skill, right? Just like exercising your body, you could exercise your mind, right? So, but how do you do that? How do you go from what is it that I have? What is it that I need to work on? So what I have here is what we do, whether it's an individual or as individuals within a team, or even as a corporation, we put you through a questionnaire. And so let's just say it's an individual. What happens with this questionnaire? Well, it tells me to the degree of which muscles you have that are strong, not as strong, or I don't want to call them weak. I prefer to call them not as well used, right? So I'm just going to show you, hopefully we can see this on the screen here. So what I have here is a bar graph, right, of the different muscles, right? And the percentage of what each muscle has. Now, this is a really good one. But what happens here, right, is by doing this, right, you get to have the ability to have high levels of challenges, particularly in Phil's case, he had high levels of challenges, right? But by learning how to use all these muscles at different times, right, it minimizes the negativity that could come from that, right? That could come from the outcome. It helps you to stay on track or get back on track if you're off track, right? To achieve the goals. So what were his goals? Well, his goals were corporate, to create and build Ferrari world, right? And so as you're staying on focus, you become stronger, and it helps your team to become stronger. Now, what I'm going to do here is, which I find it fascinating, is if you were to do this survey, for example, right, I get to see the outcome. Now, I have here one, and it's a little bit hard to tell, but I've created lines here. So when you're looking at this, you're going, wow, this is amazing. Like, this person's a client of ours. This person is like awesome. They're really up there, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that, but in this case, yes, because he is a CEO, right? And so not only is he a CEO, but he's a corporate leader. And in this way, when I look at what he has, right, then I investigate what are the skills that he's using and when. Okay, so in his case, he knows which muscles to pull out when is needed, communications or creativity and so forth, right? So what I've learned from this leader, right, is he knows how to communicate. He knows how to get to ask for ideas, brainstorm. He knows his priorities. He knows when to use structure, give structure to his team. So it sounds like a fabulous leader. Yes, he is. But what we do is, what's the advice to this person? Well, the advice to this person is a great leader, and we can tell by this, right? However, here is something that he has to work on, is because he's a high achiever, he expects that from his team as well, right? And not his team isn't all at this level, right? So he needs to be patient, right? He needs to not make any assumptions in regards to his team, in regards that they're not like him. So he needs to lead in a certain way with his team to make sure that he doesn't lose patience, he doesn't make assumptions, he doesn't think of them as full of flaws because they don't meet his criteria. So as a leader, this is what we gave him as advice, right? As main advice. Now, there wasn't
May I just
anything,
add, after testing his team as well, so we could see how they interlocked.
right, because we do follow through, right? Now, let me give you another example, which is more complex. So I have this fellow here, and since you're in the development, he owns a development company here in Toronto. Now, I've divided his skills in 3 levels. So there are 3 levels here, the top 3, and then
So please
second.
explain to us which are the 3 that are the highest.
In his
Yes.
okay, in his the creativity, confidence, connection.
And the 3 that are the lowest?
Well, I have 3 levels. So the second level is experimenting and positivity. And then the lower level is priorities and structure. So based on what I've just said, right? His lowest is priorities and structure. He's a developer. He does mixed use developments.
And
right?
it's interesting because I would have thought priorities and structure would be more along your resilience spectrum, and the ones that you talked about in regards to creativity and experimenting would be more on the agility side. So he's powerful on the agility spectrum, but not so on the resilience. Is that true?
Correct. Exactly. Exactly.
And needs development of those particular aspects.
So what happens with him, and he did it with us, and this is why I said, you know what, we've got to take a look at his resiliency. Let's, do a questionnaire with him. And what it is with him, his top 3 is creativity, confidence, and connection. So what does he do? He likes to research. He likes to talk to everybody. He likes to say, what do you think about this and this? What do you think I should do? Well, for me, I like to think of it as going into a candy store, right? Full of candies. Which one are you going to choose? I don't know. So he gets stuck in making decisions. He cannot make decisions.
Because he keeps on talking to the next person and trying to figure out what they want to say and then experiment with it.
Exactly. So the reason he came to us, he said, I have a problem with my teams. My project managers are not responding. So they're not doing their job the way I want them to do their job. Right. And et cetera, et cetera. So we looked at, okay, yes, we could do training in project management because we do that, right? We do a lot of software training and we do a lot of soft skills training. So project management and using the software project is something that we do, right? I personally train over 72 applications, right? We were talking about corporate training, and nowadays we call them life coaching. But I've been doing this for over 20 years. We didn't call it life coaching, we called it soft skills. So he approached us in regards to, I'm having trouble with my project managers. And of course, when you're having trouble with your project managers, it goes down, right? So we kind of look to see, okay, let's take a look at him personally as a leader, right? And so when we found this out, right, it was so much easier to work with him, right? Because we do give action plans.
Try to create more structure and priorities. Sounds like it was too agile and it wasn't smart agility.
Absolutely.
We've got to take a break for some messages. We're going to come back in just 2 minutes with Danielle and Phil talking about resilience and agility. And it's tough resilience and smart agility. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. We're talking tonight with Danielle Papillon and Phil Richardson about a book that they've written called Tough Resilience and Smart Agility. And when I chatted with Phil about this, I thought it was going to be about buildings, and it's about people and organizations, and sounds quite fascinating. Phil, can we talk about the survey. Like, how do you actually figure out where people are on these different muscles that Danielle's saying we all need?
Well, this is Danielle's area of expertise, so I'm not going to trot on it. But functionally, she's described, the application being to learn where people are, to do so in a way that is granular and identifies shortfalls, and then we develop a program that is intended to strengthen those areas of shortfall. So,
And this is
but
a questionnaire, Danielle, that someone fills out and you can assess it from that questionnaire. Really? Seriously?
Yes, yes.
How many
Yeah.
questions do I have to answer?
You know what? I was just trying to remember. There are about 80 questions.
80
right?
questions. I want to take the survey. I want to do the test.
Absolutely,
Good.
Brian. Absolutely. Be our guest. You're
And
gonna find it fascinating.
I think I would. The last individual that you mentioned was low on structure and priorities, which, as I said, I would have thought, really are key to resilience. Can you describe what is structure? Is it like organizational structure or having a structure to your day or what? What's structure?
Well, both. So structure of needing how do I organize my day? Like having a plan for your team. This individual didn't even have a corporate plan, right? Like a mission statement, a strategy, right? He didn't even have that, right? His dad was in the construction as well. So I guess he kind of figured, hey, I do what I keep doing what it is that I know what to do. So in this particular case, again, we like to start, because it was him as an individual and being the president of the company. For us, it was difficult to go, okay, let's take a look at your teams, because it came from upper, right, from top level. So we worked with him on that. So
To improve his structure.
correct. So
Phil, I got to ask you if I could, priorities. You described this office that was open or, glass, and that you wanted to constantly get ideas from your team. I find that when I'm in the office, I get interrupted on a really regular basis, and I can't get work done. And so maybe I'm communicating a lot, maybe I'm being creative as I discuss with people, but I don't actually get work done. And so what I got to do is I got to block time in my calendar for a 2-hour meeting with myself, so that I'm not interrupted for a while. So I got to get work done, which I guess is structure maybe. But in your scenario where you've got this open bullpen where people can interact all the time, how do you actually have priorities? Aren't you exactly the way Danielle talked about, where you're pulled in a million different directions on a regular basis, and it's difficult, if not impossible, to have priorities?
And that's a very valid point. But the response that I made for it is, I arrived early and left late. And so
that's my problem. I get my best work done between 5 and 7:30 in the evening, because or between 7 or 9 in the morning, and so I'm working a lot longer than everyone else because that's my only time alone.
That's the penalty I think you have to pay as a leader, because you don't want to deprive yourself of that valuable input that you get from not only hearing what's going on in the environment, but having people come up with great ideas and taking your time to explain them. So it is a penalty for a leader, but the fact that I paid that penalty, and gladly, I'm not begrudging it, but the result was spectacular. Ferrari World in 2019 was named the best theme park in the world by the industry association, beating Disney. So, we collectively, as a team, created and operated something that was at the top of the game. And I attribute that to the fact that, we basically use the approach I'm describing. And yes, I paid the price, shall we say, but I don't think it's avoidable.
Danielle, one of the words that we talked about a lot during COVID, at least we heard a lot, was pivot. What's the difference between smart agility and pivot?
So I look at it as pivot as changing on a dime, right? But smart agility is not just, it includes pivoting, I think, to be able to change directions quickly. But you need to stay focused, and there needs to be growth in that as well. Learning from that as well. I think that's how I would describe it. Would you agree with that, Phil?
Yeah, I do. For example, one of the manifestations is the process I described earlier, called agile, and the result of that is that you get a far greater inclusiveness and interconnectivity. For example, this may sound overly simple, but including everybody on your email list so that nobody has siloed, nobody is sitting there saying, I didn't know that. Inclusion is very, very important. And then when you have the collective capabilities of all those people, it makes for decisions that are quicker and also more likely to be right.
Can you explain this process agile? Does agile mean something? Like what is agile? What's the agile process?
Agile is in fact a thing, and it relates. Its pedigree came from the space industry in the 80s and 90s. Went into software development, of which I was a part, probably which gave me the clue as to how to apply it in commercial real estate development. And it basically is a well enunciated plan that describes how one behaves when you're functioning in the project management mode. And I'd be glad, this can be an all-day discussion. I don't want to tax your time, but the fact is, one, it is a thing. Two, it is being used by the most advanced developers in the world.
So we should Google agile process?
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
sure.
Sounds good. Danielle, you apologize. You describe these traits as muscles. And I've heard, the description about muscles and resilience being a muscle that you've got to exercise, because if you don't exercise it on a regular basis, it'll atrophy. Is that one of the reasons why you describe it as a muscle?
Yes, I describe it as 7 muscles, by the way. So yes, you do have, like physically, you do have to practice. You have to be aware that that's what you're doing. So it's like pumping, a weight bar or whatever it's
Iron.
called, iron bar, right? You just don't go, you do it nice and slowly, and you focus on it, right? And so it's the same thing here. When we give you an action plan, right, it is an exercise that you do consciously to be able to work with it and to make that muscle stronger. Now, please know that these 7 muscles, you don't use them all at once, right? It's not always all at once. You can pull them out when you need to pull them out, such as structure, for example, or priorities, for example, right?
Can you remind us of the 7, please?
Yes. So the 7 muscles is where you have positivity, confidence, priorities, creativity, connections, structure, experiencing. Now, I believe for you will be obviously very high in the connection, right? Because of what it is that you do. I also think because of the connection and the I've gone on YouTube and looked at several of your sort of different interviews you have. I'm assuming you're also very good in experimenting, right? And so I'm sure that those 2 are very high and that you use them regularly.
But
right?
I've also got structure, and we're out of time, so I've got to cut you off. I apologize to get in a message because that's part of my structure. We're going to come back and I'm going to ask them about this personal relationship they've had, because I think that sounds interesting. Before we go, Phil, how does one get this book?
We are on the Amazon, and you just Google, the name of the book, and it takes you right to the website by which you can buy it.
Or
Which is
Google
Tough
one of
Resiliency
our
and
names.
Smart Agility. We're going to take a break and come back for some concluding comments in just 2 minutes. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. I'm having a really, I think, interesting conversation tonight with Phil Richardson and Danielle Papillon about their book called Tough Resiliency and Smart Agility, which sounds quite fascinating. It's available on Amazon. I want to get it, and I want to do this questionnaire that allows us to figure out what my muscles are of the 7 muscles that Danielle says we have. Phil, Danielle, I got to ask you, I'm a little confused about this whole situation because you've been together for 25 years. You talked about a 7-year walkabout. Was it a hiatus between you? And it sounds like you had a long distance relationship. How does one have resiliency in a relationship when it's long distance?
Well, that's a fascinating question, and obviously it's driven by each individual's case. In our case, when we met, frankly, it was love at first sight. And we dated for a year. We really cared for one another, but we had between us 7 teenagers. We lived in different cities, and it was, a hard no from them as to moving to the other's city. So the result was we decided, well, we really will care for one another, but frankly, this is not evolving in the way that we would like, which would be a partnership where we would live together and marry. So we basically had our responsibilities to our kids, and we exercised them. And so we took a break. And during that time, I, decamped and left for Abu Dhabi, UAE, when I was recruited to lead the $10 billion US project. Got to remember, I'm from North Bay, and I'm going, wow, how did that happen? Anyway, I succeeded, and we received exemplary performance ratings from the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi, in fact. But I digress. So we stayed in touch while I was away. We'd occasionally see one another, and when I returned, knowing that we really cared for one another, and now past the point of having raised our kids and educated them, all of a sudden the light bulb went on. Danielle invited me for dinner when I returned home from China this time, and a few weeks later she invited me to come down for the weekend. I never left. And so that led to this segment of our relationship, which includes 10 years together, living together, and we married in 2019. So
what a great story. Thank you. Danielle, what's the secret to resilience in a relationship?
I once read somewhere that it's okay to be angry, it's okay to be hurt, all of these negative things. But one of the promises that we made to each other is that we would never divorce. And that means that you have to work through things. And believe me, 3 years of lockdown, Philip is 6'6". We live in a 2-bedroom condo, right? We survived it. I didn't kill him. We survived it. But the thing is that we promised to each other that we would never leave. And that means that you have to work through your problems, right? And communication, as you could tell, Phil likes to talk. I like to talk. Our communications is very high, right? But it's our devotion and our commitment. And so we have the same goals in life. We have the same goals in life. And I think that really, really helps a lot. Our children they were so happy that we were getting married. We're very family oriented. Our grandchildren, they just think Papa is the ultimate, right? And our morals, our values are the same, right? That really, really, the foundation is the same. The love is very strong. And it
comes back to, I guess, structure that you're talking about, so that you got to have that structure as well as the commitment, etc.
The commitment, the experimenting, we like to try different things. We like to work together. We have different ways of working. But at the end of the day, we come together, right? So yeah, it's
What a great story, Danielle Papillon. Thank you for sharing. Phil Richardson, really appreciate it. The book is called Tough Resilience and Smart Agility. Sounds like a book that's a must read for organizations, for people, and for couples. Sounds good. That's our show for tonight, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I remind you, I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online, even from Abu Dhabi, at www.saga960am.ca. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.